So good morning, everyone. I've got with me Maria Hernandez, the Head of Innovation and Digital at DHL. And I've got Rodolfo Estrada, the Innovation Director at Subway. And Ed Churchill, who's the Head of Innovation at the Joint Special Operations Command for the US Army. And Michael Entner, the Executive Director at Verizon for Digital Strategy and Transformation. So I thought we'd start by, since the topic is innovation, which is quite a wide, kind of broad area, I thought we'd sort of go around and say exactly what innovation means to each one of you guys in each one of your fields. So I guess, Michael, do you want to go first? We'll go along the line here.
Sure, I could do that. At Verizon, innovation for us is really about changing what the customer needs. I would say in the past 10, 20 years, we've always sold to our customers what they needed, and it came down to connections. We have now moved into a point where we want to help them change. And when I look at innovation, I think of it purely as change, metamorphosis of the organization, helping it become something different that can drive successful business outcomes. So we look at innovation as that mechanism which allows companies to change, grow, stretch, and really dominate their industry.
Maria, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. So over the years, I've distilled the definition of innovation to a basic formula. It's all about a business challenge. That's where it starts, and it's usually rooted in a pain point with a client or within the company. You enable that with technology to deliver customer value, and that is so powerful because you've got three key components that make up a really successful innovation.
Ed, you want to go next?
Sure. For the government, it's a little bit different. Some of the ways we look at it, we start with our end user, much like you. And ours is looking towards what they need to better accomplish their mission and to maintain as a unit strategic advantage. And we take that and come backwards from it and see sometimes the innovation for us is a complete new technology, but oftentimes it's doing jobs differently, using existing technologies in different ways, and getting to the point where we regain our competitive advantage, or if we have got it already, maintain and prepare for future fight.
Yeah.
My turn. Innovation at Subway, it's really a process that we follow from the very beginning, what we call the white space. I'm not going to go through all the steps right now, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But it's basically creating something from nothing magically. So, of course, at Subway, it's about the food and how we get to a concept that then becomes a prototype. So it's a team effort. Cross-functional team works together to develop new products or new platforms. And in my case, it's for Subway in Latin America.
So one of the things that came up in the conversations we were having previously is that you guys are all from very different industries. We've got telecommunications, we've got delivery and logistics, and we've got food, and then we've got the military. So I wonder if we could start, Ed, by you talking a little bit about the difference between innovation in the public sector and go into a little bit about what we were talking about who has ownership when a government entity innovates, like who owns that IP.
Yeah, great question. For us, I think we have a different why at the end of the day. Ours isn't we had a bad quarter or we didn't hit our profit lines. Ours are we left somebody on the battlefield and they don't come home. And that makes our why a little bit easier to transmit across the entire organization. For us, we still have the same problem where the people who are at the operators on the ground see it, the senior leaders see it, and we have a group in the middle who may be disconnected. And so the innovation for us is to drive that understanding of the why all the way down to the lowest member and through the entire organization so that people come to work. It's not a matter of we're coming to work to, oh, I've got these forms I've got to fill out, or hey, we have to make sure this delivery gets to the right place. But why does it matter that when you look at your efficiencies and you look at something and you're copying out of this and pasting over here or looking at multiple emails, why does that matter to the guy who's on the ground pulling the trigger and maybe didn't get the right information in the end of the day because we weren't quick enough? And so innovation for us is a different why sometimes, but I think at the end of the day, it feeds across everybody that once you get your organization fired up about why you want to do it, it becomes pretty easy.
And I guess I'll go next to you, Mike. With something as vast a company as Verizon, how do you maintain a culture of innovation throughout the whole organization and across such a wide range of different operations? And talk a bit about what you were just saying before about the different areas in which...
It's very interesting. When you look at a company like Verizon, it's just tremendous in scope. It's one of the largest organizations out there. And trying to foster a culture of innovation within the organization can be difficult. If you look at our roots, we started as a telecommunications company. We've gotten into content, we've gotten into security. We've reached out into various different areas over the years. And you'll see the same thing happening with other telecommunications companies as well. And trying to maintain a cohesive culture of innovation is somewhat difficult within our organization. So much so that we've actually had to create specific teams, like the one that I'm on, around innovation and fostering that innovative thinking within the organization itself. We've had to implement very special processes and procedures. As we have been discussing earlier, innovation is not just about an idea, throwing an idea out there. We could all do that, and ideas are great, but you actually have to take that idea and move it across the board until it becomes the outcome that you're looking to achieve, until you've accomplished something, whether it's saving people on the battlefield or raising the price of your stock. So for us, it's a constant battle, and I will tell you internally, we have to continue working in that same vein and reminding each other that we're there to innovate, not just sell some specific widget. That's what it comes down to for us.
And how empowered have you been? And I think this is one of the things that we've all said in our pre-conversations is how you can empower not just innovation, as you say, just ideas, but a culture of innovation that goes through the entire company. Maria, how do you think you do that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've done throughout my career, both at DHL and on IBM and at a startup that I was at, is really about you have to unleash creativity within the employees. So provide a portal, for example, so that ideas can be collected. And as Mike said, those ideas do have to go through what I call a funnel. So you got lots of ideas, and you take them through an idea curation process, then you incubate them, develop a prototype, and then eventually if they have the, we do a feasibility study as well, just to make sure that it does have the business impact or the customer impact, or maybe it does impact the market in some way. And then that moves out to production. Some of them make it, some don't. As you all know, failing fast in the innovation space is a good thing. So encourage that. So as the ideas come in, we communicate, especially to employees, that we're open for ideas, right? So submit anything that they feel would help, whether it's a customer or internal to the company. And then from there we take it through, but they feel heard, and I think that's part of unleashing this creativity, that all ideas are good ideas, and some make it, some don't. Even if they don't, it was still a good exercise for us to go through.
And Rodolfo, how does that kind of thing work in what's both a food business but also a diffuse kind of franchised model? Like, how do you encourage individual kind of Subway franchises to be innovative with what they're doing in terms of their recipes, but also talk a little bit about what you were saying about the supply chain management across all the different Latin American states and how difficult that can be?
Sure. So in the case of Subway, of course, it's the largest QSR company in the world when it comes to the amount of restaurants. Latin America has 4,500 restaurants in 34 countries and 4 BUs. Some of the franchisees, they're very creative, and they have ideas for us to develop. So we do foster an environment of innovation and ideas, because sometimes some of the best ideas come from the field. The franchisees and their employees are the ones that are really closer to the guests. We call the customers our guests. So we do encourage that. Now, when the ideas come to us, we do have a process that we follow. that again is like white space, thematic research, concept prototypes, and so forth. And then we do taste tests with the guests, etc. So we do foster that for the chain.
Can you give us an example of how that would work in practice? Like what, sort of talk us through one idea from one sort of local area that then can move through the whole company?
Absolutely. So one of the most creative franchisees that we have in the world happens to be in Puerto Rico, and his name is Lyle, and he is very creative. He's been a franchisee for Subway for many years, and he even develops new equipment to be able to develop new products for our guests. So as an example, we have a product that we call a Sauté Station, and the name has changed a little bit. The latest name is Food Theater Station, but basically imagine going to a hotel and ask for an omelette, and they make that in front of you. So at Subway, you have all the ingredients already available. So he's creating different platforms that can be used in that food theater station. So one of them is breakfast. Another one is sauté subs, to be able to get your subs with warm ingredients. And then the latest one is it's a pasta that is being tested in Puerto Rico as well. So that's a pretty good example that I can share with you guys.
Great, thanks. So, Maria, coming back to you now, I sort of look around this room and it's sort of a very diverse crowd, but the technology industry as a whole has a representation of women problem. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. How do you think, and I guess the question for all of you, but as a woman working in this field, how can the industry, all of these industries, be more inclusive of women, more encouraging to include women in that culture of innovation that's so needed?
Well, I've been one of the few pioneers, so I'm looking for others to join. But really have been honored to have had this opportunity to be in technology, to work for some amazing companies. And when it comes to innovation, and especially in tech, it's all about being heard, finding your voice, because a lot of the times what we end up doing as innovators is asking the why question, right? And I think Ed mentioned that earlier. We're asking, why is it taking so long for us to do this? Why are we not in the market? The question is why? And you have to be willing to kind of have the courage to do that in a meeting, or if you're in a product development group. If I had the opportunity to be at IBM Research, so even with scientists who have been at their, just at their work for many, many years, really asking, so what are we gonna do with this in the market? And you've been working on it for 10 years. So that, I think that is definitely something that, as innovators, whether you're a woman or a man, I think those are key. It's a key criteria. But certainly for women, sometimes for us, it's a little difficult to find our voice, so I encourage our male allies and all of the women to really support us in doing that.
And sort of that same question to you guys, how in other industries, and I guess, would you say that the military is still quite a male-dominated culture in that kind of way, and how can that be changed? And also, I guess, the sort of food and telecommunications as well, like how do you encourage more innovation by women?
Well, for us, it's a little bit different. It was funny, Maria called us an oxymoron because the government trying to innovate, the two is the biggest possible bureaucracy you can think of, trying to move rapidly. JSOC is a little different, where, and I'll say this with the understanding that 1,000 or a few thousand seems like a big number, but a few thousand people can move pretty quickly if you understand it.
Could just explain briefly, I guess, what JSOC is.
Okay, yeah, fair statement. The JSOC is the Joint Special Operations Command. We fit underneath United States Special Operations Command, and we are tasked with the no-fail missions. So if there's a no-fail hard mission, we get it. One of the things that, to Maria, my immediate supervisor is a female, and has been an operator for years and years and years. There are several other people in our team that are females, and we really value that type of feedback, because one of the things, as an alpha male, and if some people will, you just get going and you think you know what you're talking about, and it takes somebody else to go, well, hold on a second, what about? And that kind of input is exactly right. I used to have a nice set of hair like he does, but I don't anymore because I've sat in that meeting and put my hand up with a couple of stars with a couple of generals and go, why do we want to do that? And after getting flamed, and then we have the rest of that conversation, that why becomes hugely important. And I'll tell you, Lieutenant Colonel Salisbury, my immediate boss, is excellent at that, bringing that female ability to come in. And we don't care that you're a female. We care that you have the talent, and that's how we work in JSOC.
So we've got a few questions coming in through the Slido app. So we'll go for, I guess, the middle one first. So where organizationally, let's go to you with this question, where has been the best location to place the innovation part of the organization? Like whereabouts in the corporate structure or in the bureaucratic structure should that fit?
We had that discussion a little bit earlier. If you find your innovation team inside of IT, it can be a challenge. There are some benefits. You had mentioned some of those earlier. In my particular organization, we fall somewhere between sales and operations. We're a little bit outside, so that we're actually able to bring in resources from different parts of the company. And sometimes we bring in folks from outside the company as well. If we're working through ideation in a specific industry, we'll bring in industry players from other companies, which is something very different for Verizon. We've generally been a more closed ecosystem in the past. And so living inside of IT, for example, could be a challenge. If you're trying to do innovation internally within your organization and your IT people say, well, we can't do that. We don't have the capability to do that. It could be a challenge. I have been working quite often having this conversation with my customers around the fact that infrastructure doesn't need to be built, it can be consumed, and that could be a challenge for an IT organization as well. So depending on where you are, you could have different impacts. For me in my organization where I am, it's not so much of a challenge. For these folks that are doing innovation internally within their organization, I think it could be more of a challenge. Maria had mentioned some of that earlier.
Yeah, and I guess very quickly, if we go around as part of this question and say, which part of the organization do each of you directly report to?
I would say I am most closely aligned with the sales organization because I'm outward facing, working with our customers.
Maria?
And I'm in IT, but we're very closely aligned to the business.
Ed?
We're with the acquisition side more so because we cut across all of the tiers and all of our directorates to include IT and everything else. So really for us to line up against the finance made the most sense.
So we report to the marketing team because we need to be on the front end of the business. So we really innovate. We're the face that we innovate products for our guests. So marketing.
And I guess we can wrap those two questions together because I think they're two sides of the same coin, those other two. So how do you implement innovation? And are you doing it through tools and training? And also, what's the biggest mistake in trying to implement this kind of thing that these kind of organizations do? I guess, Maria, if you want to go first with that one.
I think for the biggest mistake, and this goes back to our prior question, where does innovation reside? Innovation to me is everybody's business. I know a lot of companies seed innovation teams around, and that's great, but at the end of the day, those teams have to be driving this groundswell, and it has to come bottoms up and tops down. So I would say, just having an innovation team, in one place kind of locked up, just thinking of ideas and not taking those ideas out into the business or into customers, that's a big mistake.
Is it about surfacing ideas from the bottom levels and making sure that there's a way for them to get to the top levels?
I'd like to say that for us, the biggest mistake we had is that, and it is exactly what Maria was saying, bottom up, is we get people who have really great ideas, and we look at trying to vet through these ideas. So for us, about 100 ideas will get to about 10 ideas that we will pursue. And then after we go through our process, we'll get maybe 2 or 3 that actually work all the way through and work out. One of the biggest mistakes we had initially was that we were not giving feedback. So we looked at it as what is the consumer, so for us, the operator's validation, is it important to them? 2, is it technically possible? Like everybody would like to have cold fusion, but it's just not going to happen today. And 3, was it financially possible? Can we do it? And can we not only buy that widget or whatever it was, can we sustain it? What we weren't doing is we weren't getting, after we went through that first set of filters, we weren't giving the feedback and saying, hey, look, that was a good idea. Cold fusion just isn't ready yet. I don't know how many times a day I have people walk into my office and go, hey, Ed, I was just watching Prometheus on TV, and they had this really cool drone. We want to buy that. Okay, that doesn't exist, all right? Just because Hollywood made it doesn't mean it's ready. So we didn't do a really good job at giving our feedback, and we've changed that. We make sure that as ideas come in from everywhere, that we make that effort to give it back, because if our people aren't hearing why they weren't selected, why their ideas weren't selected, they'll stop giving us our ideas. So that was our biggest mistake. And also, one of the tools we've implemented is making sure that as we go through that process, you get the feedback why, hey, Prometheus is cool. We're just not there yet.
So you mentioned cold fusion there as a technology that's been just over the horizon for a long time and will presumably be revolutionary when it arrives, but as you say, it's sort of not here anytime soon. But what are the technologies that are now arriving, these kind of new innovations that might shake up everything about what you guys do? I mean, is it blockchain in terms of supply chain management, Internet of Things? Is it artificial intelligence and machine learning in that kind of way? I guess, if we can do another go-round, but just very quickly, what's the new thing that's going to be huge in your particular industry?
Blockchain is huge right now. The challenge with blockchain is that most people don't understand how to implement it at a practical level, and some organizations just don't want to take a risk there. I'm working with one of the largest healthcare organizations in Florida, and there's an opportunity around patient records management. That is a perfect use case for blockchain. There's even a reward out there right now of $1 million for the organization that can take that forward, and it seems that nobody's taken the challenge. When you start pairing that with the other technologies, like IoT and some of the social media aspects and things like that, you really have a way to disrupt an entire market and change the way you go to market with your business. It just seems that a lot of organizations at this point aren't necessarily ready to take that leap into the technology. I don't know if it's because of the cost associated with it or that they don't feel comfortable that there's a bank of knowledge yet around those different technologies.
Maria, would you say that's the same in your experience?
For us right now, I mean, your typical, IoT, AI, AR, digital assistants, and the way that I and the team kind of build a portfolio of these emerging technologies is we have some that are potentially going to disrupt the market or the way we do business, and some that are just more process automation, which will benefit from these technologies. So I think that's also the trick to innovation, that as much, technology is going to come just, 100 miles an hour, right? So just absorbing that and really understanding where you're going to apply it, because we don't have the luxury usually to just go all disruptive. And there's a lot of risk, obviously, a lot of reward, but there's a lot of risk when you're trying, a lot of bleeding edge technologies that, you're not going to get the return. And being in a corporate environment, as much as we want to do innovation, we also have to, measure innovation. So there's that part of it, very much around the success criteria, the ROI for each of the things that we do and why we do it.
Ed, did you say that's right?
For us, it's going to be, I think what we're looking at right now is actually some of the really high-end technologies towards automation, where we could have a situation where you have an operator in an area that has the appropriate sensors. So, because we're Army, instead of calling it the Internet of Things, we call it the battlefield of things. So, bot for us, we want to look at how do we integrate all that information and then have decisions being made that are capable of answering the immediate need. So if somebody is in a fight right now, I can tell you how many rounds he's firing by a simple accelerometer on his weapon that's giving that feedback, and I know if that's a sustained rate of fire, and I know what he has left on him because I've been watching that, and I can have a drone just automatically pick up and drop off more ammunition with that one guy. That, you know what, if it gets shot out of the sky, it's not like a helicopter got shot out of the sky. And, you know, then likewise, you know, if somebody gets hit, their biosensors would automatically sense what level it is. It would take, the suit would take the appropriate action to put direct pressure and stuff like that. So that's the type of bleeding edge we see. So it's a lot of sensor fusion with the bots, having the right feedback to come back so that you're not pulling all of that data out, because otherwise people like Mike would love me because I'd buy all his bandwidth.
We love you. Yeah.
And then how do you get that automated sense that a machine is taking an action without having people fear that I'm creating Skynet at the same time?
You're not, are you? Are you? I mean, is that...
We're not creating Skynet. I've seen that. I don't want to be John Connor.
What can be the downsides of some of these innovations? I mean, so we've got questions here about how to practice it effectively, how to incorporate innovation, and how you measure its success. So I guess taking that question, but also the flip side to it is, how do you measure the failure of innovation as well? So I guess, Rodolfo, do you want to talk about it?
So when it comes to the actual innovation process, like I mentioned, as always, we do follow steps that are very set in stone, the steps themselves. So we start with what we call the white space. Basically, that's the ethnography that studies the behavior of humans. So we do a study that way, and then once we learn, you know, what people want when it comes to food and Subway, then we take that into a thematic approach. And themes could be, for example, could be Brazilian steakhouses, for example, could be plant-based proteins. Those could be like potential themes, and then we develop concepts under those themes. Those concepts are evaluated online by different, again, guests online, and then the concept that passes that step, then we bring those to life. You know, we develop prototypes, and that's the part where we bring the suppliers from different places. You know, it could be a bakery, it could be a protein, it could be veggies, etc. And we develop the actual prototypes. Then we put that in front of customers through taste tests, you know, focus groups in different parts of different countries, in my case, in Latin America. And after that, we do a market test, and the market test gets all the full advertising, it gets all the merchandising and external communication, like if it was going to be a system-wide approach. And when it passes all those phases, then at the end, we do a system-wide launch. Now, the failures, basically, a lot of even the thematic and the concept, they fail just because the guests, they don't want to see that at Subway. So that is captured through the filter, the failures as well.
How else do you measure success or failure of innovation?
We actually will start out with metrics. We're looking to achieve very specific metrics working with a customer. So we will identify that up front, and then we're going to work towards that. If we can't identify that something has actually occurred that is beneficial, that provides a positive outcome, we need to fail it quickly, and start over again. So we will use various levels of metrics, but they're usually around people, process, and technology, those same pillars. And we will ask ourselves, did we answer the question we started out with? We usually start with a bold question. For example, if we were working with somebody in the oil industry, what happens tomorrow if oil is no longer needed? That's a very serious question. You'd be surprised how many oil industry execs will say that's never going to happen. But we can see that we're moving towards something different. So we start, when we work through any type of new innovation, we want to see that there's actually a tangible effect coming out of it. And so we do state it up front and move towards that.
Maria, is that the same for you? Do you sort of start with the target? It's sort of goal-oriented from the beginning?
Yes, very early on, we define that also with the business. And, I mean, we measure everything, you know, productivity savings, you know, reduction in customer service calls. So there's, depending on the project or the idea that's being evaluated, then the success criteria varies.
What about the fact that you guys exist in all of your organizations? Should and how widely spread through the industry is having an innovation department? I mean, how should this be something that every company has, even sort of from the small startups, or is it a luxury that only big organizations can have?
I would say, and it kind of talks about, one of your questions talk about that, it needs to be a part of your daily conversation. You need to be taking a hard look at what you're doing today and if that is a viable and sustainable process. Because as you go forward, you may find that, this for us, this rifle has been a mainstay for us forever. It'll be good. It'll never go away, like that oil will never go away. But when you start looking at it, and if you're not paying attention, the guy who comes out with a directed energy weapon, who does create the lightsaber or does create the laser gun, and we're still plinking with a 5.56, you're in trouble. So it needs to be part of your daily. And the way we can tell that we're doing the right thing and we're cutting across the right people is when we show up. Don't judge me. We're huge Star Trek fans. I can always tell we're doing all right if I show up and they have like an R2-D2 picture on their slide somewhere or something like that. I know we're getting to them. But that's how we make sure daily that we're getting out to people and that they are paying attention to what they need to be paying attention to.
So we've got 1.5 minutes left, so I thought I'd just go around one by one and ask what's the next big innovation in your field that you sort of predict coming?
In my field, it's definitely 5G wireless. 5G wireless is going to change the way we do business every day. And I've actually written an article about it. It's going to change the way we work and the way we live. I think it'll probably push people to beyond the suburbs, beyond the cities, into more of a telecommuting type, type mode. And I think that the 5G technology itself is going to drive a lot of innovative new products that are coming down the pipe. And we see that in our innovation centers now with companies that we're working with around incubation.
Right.
I would say for the logistics business, it's all around IoT. And even though IoT has been around for a few years, it's really the application of that to a company that has 220, does business in 220 countries. So I think the application of IoT to a business where you're trying to get a package from point A to point B is going to be, disruptive in the future.
Ed?
For us, it's going to be that ability we're not going to call it IoT, we're going to call it bots, battlefield of things, but it's going to be that idea of being able to fuse that information in a way that we are that we're able to apply AI to it so that we're no longer having to observe, detect, decide, and act, but we get into a predict and act phase so that we're actually moving faster than the enemy. But that is where we see AI becoming hugely important to us.
And Rodolfo?
I will say that in the food industry, specifically on QSR, I think that to read, the mind of the guest, the consumer, I think that's really important. I was in Costa Rica about 2 months ago, and we met with the company that manages the digital menu boards, and they were explaining to us that the technology today exists that if you have a loyalty card today, and you go to a Subway in Costa Rica, you have the option that could change the menu, that could change what you see. So the actual menu, the digital menu could be geared towards the guest that is buying the product at that time. So it's about the communication. I think that's going to be coming more into the whole industry.
And that's all the time we have. Please give a big hand to all of our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.